the Butcher of Basra, and I am bringing you a commentary video for Napoleon Total War. This is an online multiplayer battle 1 vs 1 on the Grassy Flatlands Map. I'm in command of a Prussian force, and my opponent, BSA Risquard, is also in command of a Prussian army. This video will demonstrate a failed attempt on my behalf to carry out a maneuver known as kiting, and will also stress a very important lesson in the art of war, and that is to pick your fights. And over here you can see my army, which is represented by the red dots on the minimap, and my build is up on the screen. And on the other side of the map, represented by the blue dots on the minimap, is my humble opponent, Risquard, and his build is up on the screen. My battle plan for this engagement was simple. I wanted to separate my army into two bodies, a holding body that would kite, and an assault force that would mount a fierce assault on one of my enemy's flanks. Kiting refers to a maneuver where your men constantly avoid the enemy by staying out of combat range. This forces the enemy to pursue you, which not only strains his micromanagement, but also tends to open flanking lanes for you to lay down enflating fire on his pursuing forces. My kiting body would consist of my single unit of Silesian Schützen, supported by 4 units of line infantry. My assaulting body would consist of my foot guards and my Prussian Fusilier. The plan was to use the kiting body to constantly fire and retreat, all the while staying out of the enemy's range. The success of this tactic completely relies on the superior range of the Silesian Schützen, which are my riflemen, to harass the enemy light infantry, which have less range. This will force them to come to me, and if they don't, I will have the freedom to constantly lay down some very accurate fire on them from my riflemen. However, Risquard deploys his men in an unusual way. 4 out of his 5 light infantry regiments are on his far right flank, supported by 2 line infantry units. His center consists purely of line infantry and is not screened by any long range, and on his left he has his 5th light infantry regiment supported by his general, who is in a unit of foot guards. It became very clear to me what enemy flank would be the target of my assault, and what flank would be the one that I would kite. With only 1 unit of Prussian Fusilier on Risquard's left, I could mass all my lights there and overpower that flank with superior firepower. However, in order for this to succeed, I would have to successfully evade an inevitable onslaught by the superior firepower he had on my kiting left flank. And over here you can see my 4 units of Prussian Fusilier and the remainder of my assaulting force, which would consist of 3 foot guards and a unit of line infantry, redeploying from my center to my right flank to begin an assault on Risquard's left. However, this redeployment is very unorganized and messy, and Risquard knows how fatal it can be to strike when the enemy is unprepared. He quickly pushes up his assault force on his right flank to try and get some shots on the men on my left flank who have not formed a battle line. In the meantime, the remainder of his army begins to move to the left to get into position to face the threat that I am now rolling up onto his left flank. At this point, I realize that Risquard is trying to seize the initiative on my left, and I quickly order my advancing line infantry to stop and order my Silesian Schützen to take position in front of them to open fire on the advancing enemy Prussian Fusilier. Remember, the point here is to stall the enemy while I do most of the damage on my right flank. My riflemen fire a volley and my kiting force quickly retreats. In the midst of giving all these orders, I make one of the deadliest mistakes one can make on a 19th century battlefield. My light infantry on my right flank have advanced far ahead of my supporting foot guards. Even though they managed to unleash some volleys on the enemy line that is still getting into position, the large gap between the foot guards and the Fusilier is effectively the green light for Risquard's lancers to charge at my vulnerable light infantry. All I can do is retreat and hope that his cavalry pursue my men into the range of my foot guards. Luckily, that is exactly what happens, and Risquard's Lancer regiment is massacred. And over here you can see my kiting force on my left flank continually retreating and staying away from the enemy, but my assault force is still miles away from Risquard's left flank. If I can close the distance between my assault force and Risquard's left flank, my Prussian Fusilier will wreak havoc to his lines, especially since they are supported by foot guards. However, I am very reluctant to push up out of fear of being flanked by the 4 enemy Prussian Fusilier on my left that I am kiting away from. If I push up on the right, Risquard is going to stop pursuing my kiting force and simply flank my assault force. And the reason why there is so much ground between my assaulting force and his left flank is due to my reluctance to push up aggressively on the enemy, and also Risquard's reluctance to take the first volley from my Prussian Fusilier. But in the end, it is Risquard who moves up. But notice how he's moved the men in his center. They are not in range of my entire assault force, and what Risquard is trying to do is to attack only part of my battle line without allowing me to return fire with all my troops. My light infantry fire a volley, but rather than allowing them to stick around and fight, I pull them back behind my foot guards, who are now advancing towards Risquard's center. However, once again, I am very reluctant to push up aggressively despite the advantage in firepower and morale. I find myself in a now or never situation, but I fail to take the initiative, and my battle plan slowly begins to backfire. My kiting up until this point of the battle has been everything that I could have wished for, but all it takes is one mistake for you to panic. Once you panic, the situation begins to spiral out of control. Over here on my left flank, I managed to fire a volley from my rifles in retreat, but rather than pulling my line infantry back with my riflemen, I pushed them forwards towards Risquard's pursuing light infantry. What follows is a concentrated and murderous volley from 4 regiments of Prussian Fusiliers. And to make matters worse, in an act of desperation, I charge my Lutzos Risquard towards the enemy skirmishers, and the enemy line infantry shower them with lead. Things begin to look grim on the left flank, and to make matters even worse, my so-called assault force is in a formation 3 ranks deep and more than a mile away from the enemy. Risquard eventually positions his line infantry in the center to lay down some flanking fire on my assault force. My Prussian Fusilier gets stuck in a very awkward position in the line, and this costs me many men. And remember, you should always try to put your men in a position where you can fire at the enemy while minimizing the amount of return fire the enemy is capable of. My kiting force on the left continues to fail miserably, and Risquard constantly manages to get shots on the body, which is meant to remain out of enemy range. In an attempt to get back at Risquard in any way possible, I sneak a unit of lancers behind his lines on my right flank in order to harass his men. I had realized that Risquard's left flank was only guarded by a very depleted unit of lancers. If I could get some of my lancers behind his lines, I could divert some of his attention to deal with them, while allowing me to think more clearly and try and get things back on track. And this is exactly what happens. I managed to pull 2 units of cavalry away from Risquard's right flank, who comes chasing after my unit of lancers. But of course, I had no intention of waiting for them. I quickly charge my lancers into the vulnerable unit of Prussian Fusilier on Risquard's left flank. This proves to be very effective because the unit eventually routs, momentarily giving me an edge in the firefight. Risquard leaves his 2 units of lancers stationary on his left flank, but again, I decide to take the initiative, and rather than waiting, I charge at them with my single unit of lancers on my right. However, this proves to be the flashpoint of the battle. My lancers are no match for his, and they quickly break and rout. Risquard then orders his men to attack my most valuable weapon on my right flank, my light infantry. And remember, cavalry is the most effective weapon against light infantry, and Risquard uses this fact to deal me a crushing blow. My numerous blunders, poor decision-making, and Risquard's cunning maneuvering has quickly swung the battle in his favor. With nothing left to lose, I decide to charge the remainder of my cavalry corps on my left flank at Risquard's remaining cavalry on his right. with my light infantry annihilated, my cavalry reduced to a negligible force, and the majority of my regiments heavily depleted, it has become obvious that a grim defeat is inevitable. In conclusion, I have learned that kiting is not a maneuver that can easily be coupled with aggression without outstanding micromanagement, and outstanding micromanagement is something I lacked severely at the time this battle was fought. I made many tactical blunders throughout the battle, and my opponent punished me for them. But defeat is not something one should hide. It is from our mistakes that we learn. Excellent game to my opponent Risquard. It was a pleasure playing with him, and just for the record, he started a YouTube channel featuring Napoleon Total War commentaries, so check him out if you're keen for more. And of course, don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe.